What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my main channel, so if you're interested in what if Naruto had Madara and the Kyuubi sealed inside of him, or what if Naruto was a low born in Westeros and became king, go check out my main channel. And if you're interested in what if Naruto was taken over by the Kyuubi when he was born, or what if Naruto was trained by Itachi after leaving Jiraiya, go check out my second channel. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. Duskendale sat on Blackwater Bay. Literally the entire city, warped to the geography of the bay, designed around the geographic curl of the harbor. King's Landing remained the largest port city in the Crownlands, but Naruto preferred Duskendale over King's Landing because Duskendale didn't smell like shit. The clean air that filled his lungs and the consistent sounds of the sea helped Naruto keep himself centered and his mind clear of unnecessary things. Sitting on a sept's downward sloping spire, Naruto looked out at Duskendale with a smile warming his face. Light started breaking through the clouds. The sun's warm presence filtered through the pearl glass windows of the other septs in Duskendale, making the city light up with a natural radiance. Another thing Naruto couldn't get in the Crownlands great city, not with the Red Keep dominating everything. Naruto knew not everyone saw things the way he did, and that was a shame. So many people get stuck to the ground, stuck to their lives, and can't see the world around them. Maybe they weren't looking, or perhaps they couldn't see. The result was the same in both instances. I can't imagine so many people going to a sept service in Dorne. The people are too busy being hungover in the mornings. It started as a wry smirk and evolved into full-blown laughter when he put those words through the ringer of his imagination. He couldn't even begin to imagine a crooked Oberyn stumbling into a sept, the scent of alcohol and sex clinging to him. Oberyn's head would be set straight by Elia, no doubt. Thinking about the Viper Princess left Naruto cringing like someone who got bitten by a snake. He reacted in such a way because of how he chose to leave Sunspear, a poor choice in hindsight. I have to hope that Elia won't skin me for leaving her with a note. I also need to bring back a present for Rei, or she won't speak to me daughter like mother. In that regard, Naruto put those thoughts in the back of his mind for now. His weight carried him down to the precipice of the roof. After jumping to his feet, these are things I can worry about after I've done what I came here to do. Being one who worked by himself, Naruto often found himself talking to himself. People probably thought he was insane. He blamed his teacher for that particular quirk. He looked at the tendrils of darkness encroaching on his flanks, a difference in the light created by the sturdy Dun fort at his back. Luckily for the fort, Naruto had no interest in what was inside of it. His wants took him away from the land to the sea. That's why he needed to find himself a boat of some kind. If I wanted to get a boat with no questions asked, where do I go? A few moments passed, then a spark of realization jolted through the young man's cerulean pools. Slapping his fist into an open palm, he looked to the west with a smirk. I think there are a few gambling dens by the docks. I'm sure I can swindle something of use down there. Stepping off the sept's hallowed roof, the blonde-haired man dropped like a stone. Small wisps of blue circulated his fingertips as he reached to his left. Naruto grasped the massive ledge beneath the crystal glass window with his chakra strength and grip. Letting himself dangle, he swung himself back and forth. Once his feet hit the sept stone structure, he pushed chakra to his feet, hence sticking himself to the building. Naruto stood against gravity casually for a handful of seconds. The muscles beneath his pants slowly prepared for what came next. A light blue ring pulsated around his feet and off Naruto when he shot through the air high enough to be out of sight. When it came to the people walking Duskendale's streets, his slow loss of altitude proved that Naruto wasn't flying, but it did what he wants it to do. After covering a decent chunk of the traveling distance, Naruto skipped off a roof and went feet first into a stack of hay next to a stable housing a herd of 6 goats. The pile of golden straw shuddered before Naruto's head forced itself out. It didn't take Naruto long to emerge from the pile of hay. He swept the farming essential from his golden mane while the grouping of animals kept their chattering sounds. That definitely wasn't my smoothest move, but it worked. He'd work on his landings later when he didn't have a set idea in mind. For now, he had a boat to track down. Stepping out into the main walkways of Duskendale with the grace of someone who didn't crash land, Naruto quickly integrated himself with the men and women moving throughout the common area. His burning dark orange and muted gold threads drew some attention, but nothing more than a precursory glance from interested parties. Fortunately, with the end of the year quickly approaching, all sorts of people were out and about preparing for parties and such. This fluid string of festive feelings made it easy for a skilled infiltrator like Naruto to blend in. Only one place should smell like booze this early in the morning, a place where people waste money and spill alcohol. Following That thought process Naruto trailed after the faint hint of alcohol that got blown at him thanks to the light ocean winds. He used that stimulus of his senses as the guide to help him navigate an unknown location. Naruto didn't need long to find one of the establishments on his mind. He went to enter the gambling den when the man posted outside of the building halted him by shoving him back. Gathering his feet, Naruto didn't even lose balance as he stared at the man placidly. "Excuse me, get out of here, you ain't welcome, boy." The man's tone was inherently vulgar. It nearly offended Naruto more than the shove itself. "I've had enough of you dumb shits, get out of here before I mess up your face, pretty boy." Naruto rolled his blue eyes, blue, not green, uneducated and filled with blind hatred. The assassin already found this man wanting Naruto was the standard bearer for opposing Lannisters. That did not equate to making an enemy of every blonde person he met. He'd save that for fools like the one standing in front of him. "Listen, I've had a good morning, so I'll ask nicely, please move out of my way or else." The challenge in his request triggered the man and his malicious smile. "Or else what?" he asked as a small whistle flooded through the slight gap between his front teeth. The thug understood what came next, but he couldn't get to his weapon fast enough to stop Naruto. His blonde hair was a blur in the side of the man's eyes before a vein of pain crashed on the man. That pain can find its trace back to Naruto's glowing blue hand, specifically the back of his hand. Naruto knocked the man unconscious before he even rolled back around to land on his head. Glancing back, Naruto smirked at the red mark burned onto the man's already scarred cheek. "And a good morning to you too," the assassin said quietly as the people whispered and street urchins rushed over to take the money that spilled from the man's pockets, leaving no concern for the man. Out on the road, a chuckling Naruto moved into the quiet gambling den. There weren't that many people in the establishment. Naruto was free to go for the bar of the building because of this. Ringing the small bell, the blue-eyed traveler tried to summon some service. He felt the eyes on his back but ignored them in favor of looking ahead at the options lined up on the bar's shelves. A shimmer on top of a black bottle had Naruto glancing to his left. Duskendale's visitor discovered someone courageous enough to sit on the stool next to him. It was a man wearing a confident smirk on his tan face, taken aback momentarily by the lopsided mohawk that covered only the left side of the man's head. Naruto blinked hesitantly. "Do you need a drink too?" His unnamed companion looked at Naruto for a second of silence before bursting into raspy laughter. The stranger's body shook, causing his scarred fingers and damaged knuckles to strike the bar's countertop. "Aye, that's rich sunshine. There aren't any barkeeps on duty at this time of the day." Naruto let his confusion filter to the expression on his face. Why would there ever be a bar that didn't have someone watching over it? Isn't that a terrible, stupid idea? Spinning in his seat, the man in the know braced himself against the bar so that he could purposefully stare at a certain man waiting in the shadows of the den. Naruto found the man easy enough. How could he overlook someone comparable in size to the mountain? "You see the lug with the big belly? He and his brother are the guards of this place. The brother, he's just as big and scary as that one. People don't mess with them anymore, not since they busted this one guy's head open with a walking stick." If he meant to threaten Naruto with the story, then he failed in doing so. The only thing the words accomplished was satisfying the blonde. Knowing someone or multiple people can keep things in order pleased Naruto. Nasty but good to know. Naruto could tell by the man's smirk that he enjoyed it whenever someone was dumb enough to challenge the den's protectors. That same man also stuck his hand out. "Name's Darien Pike. What's someone like you doing in a place like this?" Ignoring what sounded like a modified pickup line, the blonde cocked an eyebrow at the Iron Islands bastard. "What do you mean by that?" Darien followed up with a bit of elaboration. "Clean? You're way too clean to be in a questionable place like this." To further drive home his point, the Pike gestured to the drunken, passed out men at some of the tables with nothing but steins for company. His chuckle also served as an admission of sorts, a confession that told Darien he was right, though he agreed with Darien. Naruto didn't trust the man, not one bit. "I typically keep my plans to myself. Fewer people can track me that way. What about a friend? You'd share with a friend, wouldn't you?" "I wouldn't go that far, Darien," Naruto replied quickly, keeping an eye on the bastard. With every rejection uttered, he seemed friendly enough, but that didn't mean anything in the long run. "Seriously, I'm not your enemy, and that makes me a friend." The islander's casual disposition might have helped with the common man, but Naruto wasn't normal. Naruto shrugged his shoulders flippantly. "Bad luck. I don't need a friend. What do you need then?" The blonde had a kunai fall out of his other sleeve and into his hand, his other hand busied with pinching the bridge of his nose, stabbing the blade down into the wood in front of him. Naruto turned to his company at the bar. "You're not letting this go, are you?" Darien's mix of green and brown colored eyes took a measure of the blade before he looked at Naruto. His stern expression slowly melted into a grin that made the assassin sigh with exasperation. "Nope, holding on for dear life. I can end his life before the big bad can even get his hand around his hammer. If Naruto needed to tell Darien no a few more times, then his thought might gain enough traction to become a reality clairvoyant or just perceptive. The man with pike attached to him said something that dissuaded Naruto from letting his kunai taste blood. I wager it'd be easier to tell me what you want. If you did, this could be over already. Naruto's fingers wrapped around the taped handle of his kunai one digit at a time until he had the proper grip. He yanked it out of the wood, but sighed and sheathed the knife back on his person. I need a boat. A boat, you say? There was a gleam in the Iron Island's native's eye at the mention of boats. Darien's interest got renewed, and then some, as he pawed at the small patch of coarse hair on his chin. Are you looking to buy, build, or steal? Buy. He had all of the prize money from winning the melee and joust. No need to complicate things when he could spend a portion of his endless riches, or it may as well be endless with how little Naruto needed to purchase horse no kunai. Occasionally some of Darien's enthusiasm left his body as it deflated in front of Naruto's eyes. That reaction made it painfully clear he hoped for the opposite. He wanted Naruto to steal one, no doubt. Stick in the mud. You looking for anything specific? For all the knowledge Naruto did have, none of it could be considered naval. Thanks to that, the blonde gave a shrug, dripping with a carelessness that came from ignorance. I need something that won't sink and is larger than something dumb like a raft. An undignified combination of a laugh and a bellowing snort escaped from Darien's open mouth. If Naruto hadn't amused him with that, then Darien might worry about being embarrassed that he made such a noise. Holding a finger up, he gathered himself with a deep breath. I just so happen to own an additional vessel, a gift from one of my more affluent lovers here in Duskendale. She isn't anything impressive. The ship, I mean my lover, well, she's another story altogether. One sail and a wooden bunkroom on deck, big enough for one person. It ain't glorious, but it doesn't have any problems. Standing up from his slouched seat, Darien smirked at a curious Naruto. She can be yours if you want her. Naruto felt his gold weighing down his pocket and a chance waving in front of his face. How much? Since we're friends, how about you give me 100 dragons for my bar tab and we'll call it square. He needed every bit of restrained inside of himself to stop his hand from slapping his forehead. Darien had to bring up the whole friend thing again. Naruto let it go for the sake of his health. Reaching near his waist, he dropped a heavy pouch in Darien's hand. You're in luck, Darien. I only carry sums of 1,000. Keep the change. Darien didn't need to count the coin. He felt that the weight was right in his hand. You'll find the deed in a set of lockers within a half-collapsed building outside of the eastern port. If you show that to the authorities, you're good to go. A pleasure doing business with you. If this is a trick, I will find you and make you pay more than a measly 1,000 dragons. Waving off the insult, the pike sailor turned to Naruto with another proposition. You know you can hire me to. Darien found himself speechless. Where'd he go? Son, spear, of all the stupid things you could have done, you picked this one. Naruto, dazed to digest what happened, didn't temper any of the Viper Princess's anger. She had to find out that Naruto left Dorn from a letter he left rolled up on top of his pillows. At first she worried that something happened to him after the attack at the party. After she read the parchment, her worry turned into indignant anger. Who did he think he was, up and taking off like that? Only one thing saved Naruto from the woman's unholy rage, and that was what he left in the letter for her daughter. Had Naruto not included a whole section explaining things vaguely to her daughter, then he'd have been hunted down by now. Rhaenys was just happy to be getting the gift Naruto promised. Upon returning, Elia knew that part of her frustrations came from personal matters left unresolved with the Arab blonde. She thought that she'd have time to talk with Naruto about King's Landing after the party that came with his new lordship. That never happened because the world once again proved that nothing was guaranteed. Her brown hair fanned out behind her as she fell backward onto Naruto's bed with a long sigh, leaving the letter text down on her stomach. The princess looked up at the dark ceiling wistfully. When was the last time I missed someone like this? Elia knew better than to compare this feeling to the longing she had for her family from months ago. Maybe when she first married Rhaegar she felt this way, but that was a maybe at best. She ran her fingertips over the back of the parchment, grazing against the slightly abrasive material. As her thoughts continued to swirl around in her head, the young mother couldn't help but think of that night with Naruto, and not just the kissing. She remembered the heartfelt words that he poured out to her, how they made her heart come to life, not to mention the amazing body he hides under his clothes. The Martell woman stifled a breath. Blushing, she tried to come to terms with what she just said. Gods, I sound just like Ashura. Her friend had no shame talking about Naruto's impressive physique. When the blonde came up in their discussions, bringing up her friend's name reminded Elia that she had another issue to resolve before Naruto returned to her to Dorne. She and Ashura needed to talk regarding their relationships with the blonde. Elia knew that Ashura had an interest in Naruto from the moment they left Starfall, but after he saved her at the party, Ashura's affection for their mutual friend only grew. It felt wrong having this discussion without Naruto's input, because he was just as much a part of this as her and Ashura. However, Elia didn't want Something ugly to grow in her unintentionally. The thought of jealousy made her shake her head vigorously. I already have the stark bitch to hate. I won't let the same thing happen with my best friend. I refuse to see it happen again. A fire burned valiantly behind her mocha brown hues. She didn't know what to expect from the conversation. What she did know was that this talk between her and Ashera needed to happen. I won't bow, I won't bend to expectations, I will not break, she promised herself, smiling. At the liberating feeling of having her confidence back, the door to Naruto's room flung open and a voice followed in with the same enthusiasm laced into it. Mama Elia sat up just as her darling daughter came rushing into the room. Ha, I knew I could find you. What are you doing in Naruto's room? She asked with a childish tilt of her head. Smiling, Elia leaned forward until her forehead bumped against Rainy's forehead. Rainy giggled for a moment, smiling up at her mother who mirrored the expression. I was taking a breath. Ray, why are you sick? Mama Rainey's asked, confused by what her mother was doing. Quickly patting Rainey's head, Elia did her best to push those troublesome thoughts out of her beautiful daughter. No dear, not at all, taking her mother for her word. Rainey's followed that with a beaming smile. She grabbed her mother's free hand and began to pull her with all the might her childish frame could create. Come on then, Mama, you promised you'd play with Ari and me. Elia giggled merrily at the enthusiasm jumping off her daughter, shaking her head. Elia held onto Naruto's note tightly. There'd be time for talking later, but for now she needed to enjoy life, a life with her daughter. Thank you, Naruto. Time skip. Naruto, this is by far the craziest idea you've ever tried, and I've seen them all firsthand. Naruto insulted himself, not shy and laying on the blame for the predicament he found himself trying to navigate. Yanking down on the ropes to keep the sail steady, the green sea-goer did his best to keep his boat afloat. The storm that settled above the narrow sea came with such ferocity that the after effects of the massive waves and sharp winds trickled down into the Blackwater Bay, making it that much more difficult for Naruto to reach Dragonstone. Headwinds and large waves nearly toppled him several times. Already he was sure dumb luck was the only reason he hadn't drowned in the black waters. He couldn't use chakra less he risked ripping the sails, so all he had to rely on was his balance and natural strength. Naruto didn't like how the boat quivered under his feet, nor did he like the water splashing over his feet, but he had more important things to focus on, like staying alive. Spitting out a mouthful of sea spray, Naruto grumbled at the storm. Where did this fucking thing come from? Nature responded to his lip with a sharp crack of lightning that struck the choppy waters off the port side. The soaked blonde spat out some sailor language and tried his best to ignore the rope burns on his palms. Am I even on track anymore? Naruto's vision slowly sharpened thanks to the growing amount of life force amassing in them. The dark of the night abated some thanks to this handy application of chakra. Now he saw the stars that the storm tried to conceal. One at a time the shining beacons popped up, painting a picture through addition. The one thing Naruto went out of his way to read about before this trip was the stars. He needed those stars to guide his hand because they were his map to Dragonstone. Follow the smallest star in the night sky to reach the stone of dragon's blood, he muttered to himself, pulling the sail to turn his boat to the east. Naruto took a breath for a moment. His clenched hands eased their crushing grip on the ropes of control. It proved to be a mistake on his part. As soon as he dropped his guard, the weather took a sudden change out on the open water. It sounded like the planet itself howled as the wind changed directions from blowing inward to going out. The entire vessel jerked forward, sending Naruto tumbling down onto the sloshing deck of the boat. Blackwater's wet embrace welcomed Naruto after his fall. Thankfully the water proved an effective way to snap Naruto out of his stupor. The assassin hurriedly looked to the sail and breathed out in relief. Once he hopped back onto his feet, his ship's sail pushed out to its limit, but there wasn't a single rip for Naruto to worry over. He did worry about the weather patterns, however none of this makes any sense. What I know about the world is that a phenomenon of this level only happens when something extraordinary has come into being. Who or what has just changed everything? Time didn't amount to much on the open sea. He could have been behind that sail for a minute or an hour and he wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. In the end, Naruto kept one foot stuck to the mast with chakra and held onto the ropes until his small boat approached the ancestral home of this generation of Targaryen blood, Dragonstone. An abrupt jolt of latent energy shot through Naruto's body, causing the blonde's head to throw beads of water in every direction. As he looked around for the source of his reaction, he quickly realized that only one thing could have made him feel that way. Dragonstone, the home of the Dragon Lords. I can feel the Valyrian magic in the air. It's like a bubble amplifying everything around the island. It's not a pretty place, but that doesn't make this island any less incredible. When men and women want to make something, they can come up with some breathtaking things. Too many people cared about things like physical beauty, but not Naruto. Dragonstone was a grim place of that there is no doubt. However, the assassin saw beauty in that he saw something authentic to itself, a place conveying the genuine feelings of its people. The Targaryens and their dragons were fierce, and so was Dragonstone. The knowledge that Dragonstone got shaped by Valyrian magic made it something of a pariah in Westeros. Aerys too didn't do his family any favors, but the Targaryens' blatant use of magic ended up giving magic a bad name through association. He didn't believe that magic was. Naruto's admiration for the dark backdrop of the draconic land came to an end when an excessive chunk of stone slammed into the water beside his boat. He quickly stuck his arms out for balance as a cross-section wave pounded into the hull of his ship, making it rock to the left. When the geyser of salt-laced water crashed on him, the drenched assassin looked bleakly at his dripping hands. I need to dock this somewhere that I can hide it. The last thing he wanted was for a Baratheon ship to find his. It took Naruto some time to locate suitable land. His searching paid off when it turned out an inlet cut in the island just large enough to fit his one sailboat. The last rope landed on the rock structure to keep the ship in place when Naruto heard a loud crash from deeper within the island. It was the last battle of the war. The final clash between dragon and stag was playing out on Dragonstone. Time skips here. What do we do without the royal fleet? We do not have the numbers needed to keep the usurper's army in the Blackwater. A man wearing gold armor and a dragon's talon on his breastplate screamed over the sound of their main gate getting hammered by a ram. The commander that the royal bannerman looked to for guidance said nothing at first. His dark eyes stayed staunchly on the red and white griffins on his round buckler. Jon Connington gazed up into the rainstorm that found its way through the slits in his helmet. Everyone knew that the fleet was their only chance at victory. The knight's golden cape whipped against the wind, dripping with raindrops fresh from the angry sky. Pulling the straps tighter on his shield, he set his steely gaze upon the choke point into the small square in front of the stone drum. We'll fight to protect our queen, even if it takes our lives. That is our oath, and unlike the usurper, we honor our vows. Like the storm above, Jon's thundering words rippled through the forces gathered around him, boosting them with promises of honor proved to be the right move. It didn't take long for the men to start a chant that combated the pounding of the invaders at their doors. Smiling at the courage displayed by his brothers in arms, Jon looked to the man who reported the demise of the fleet. You go find Ser Derry and have him ready the secondary defenses around Stone Drum. We must protect Queen Riella at all costs. The junior guard saluted before running off to relay the orders from the front line as Jon Connington stood at the back of the defensive formation. He saw the determination of his troops. Their strength reinforced the smile of the man from the Stormlands. If these men can stand strong, then I will not dishonor them by bringing any less. Water flowed freely down the rounded edges of his white armor while the man's right hand moved to rest on the winged pommel of his blade. The gesture provided him with as much comfort as it did strength. Jon marched to the front, with a newfound desire burning within him. At the very front of the braced barrier of men, the Griffin Knight saw how the thick gate shuddered with every intrusive thrust of the Baratheon battering ram. Taking a deep breath, he put his head down and started a silent prayer. Dear Seven, if this is to be my last night, all I ask is that you reward my family for the loyalty I have shown to my king and queen. A final nod of his helmeted head sealed his plea. Ready for anything, the son of the Stormlands stared through the broken trail of falling rain. Targaryen forces stared into the hungry faces of the Baratheon invaders when the gate finally fell amidst their hoarse cheering. First through the gate was a tall man with thick shoulders, his large frame covered in a knight's armor and a brown pelt soaked with rain. On both sides of the helmet, antlers sprouted outward, giving his allegiances to the Baratheon away. Jon knew better. This wasn't any ordinary bannerman. He stood across from the usurper's brother, Stannis Baratheon. Lord Connington's son tried to stay calm, yet his tightening hands gave away his true feelings. He kept his hand up to ensure that the antsy men behind him stayed in their position. It required discipline if they wanted a chance against the superior numbers Stannis commanded. Stannis Baratheon met the equally stern glare of Jon Connington with an impassive glower. The space between the two men never felt any more vast than in this moment of tension. Your brother killed my best friend. I will kill you and send your head back to the usurper, Stannis, Jon promised. With a pointed gesture from his silver steel, you and your house will pay for your treachery. Men, bring me the dragon spawn. Stannis' call to action was equivalent to letting the war beasts off their leashes. Thunder shattered the cry of man, and a wave of bloodthirsty humanity poured into battle. Jon's muscles curled beneath his armor. He anchored the bottom edge of his dripping sword on his buckler, ready to face the wave coming for them. Show these dogs what real men look like, he cried out to his fellow loyalists. A trifecta of avid lightning bolts danced down from the sky as the unbridled fury of the Baratheon charge made the Dragonstone defense buckle back. In an uncontrollable moment of chaos, swords threw around both water and blood as they sought out the closest enemy. They needed some time to do so, but the entrenched position helped the royal supporters fend off the fierceness of New King's forces. The pushback created enough space for the Dragonstone army to fight back with bloody Retaliation, death and blood quickly piled up on both sides as men slaughtered each other for their lord and lady respectively. This courting of death turned into a dance that had no winners in the end but got readily completed by brave men. Jon pushed through the bloody carnage one body at a time. The heat of battle didn't give him much time to look around, but what he saw gave him hope. His men were killing more Baratheon than the other way around. He instinctually lifted his buckler and stopped a sword slash before it came down. Jon didn't waste any time in stabbing his blade through the man's unprotected stomach, granting the man a quick death. Ripping his sword free, he tried to lunge to his left and save one of his knights. Jon didn't get there in time and had to watch a sword behead one of his own. The killer didn't have the chance to turn to his next opponent before Jon's sword punched through the front of the bloody man's throat. His voice came out sharp like the sword that spilled the dead man's blood. Jon put his foot on the man's back and kicked him forward, sending the dead man to the ground and freeing the sword in a splash of red gore. Attacking from behind. Have you no honor, just like your friend rapist Rhaegar? A cold fury brewed in Stannis' voice as he stepped up to Dragonstone's front line leader. His antlers dripped rain onto his waterlogged pelt, but the weight didn't hinder Stannis in the slightest. Turning around to face his adversary, Jon didn't hide the hateful scowl sketched beneath his helmet. You speak of honor, and yet you're here to kidnap innocent children. I'd call you a man, but you're more of a dog following orders at the end of a leash. Stannis' face flashed with the fury so intimately connected with his family's name. Watch your mouth, boy. You know nothing about all I hear are the words from your brother's mouth. It smells like the same shit too. When were you last your own man? Aaron Boy, the Knight of Griffins, continued to demean and diminish the jealous brother with great success, so angry that he couldn't even dispute his foe. Stannis charged at Jon with a guttural roar storming from his mouth. The power of the Baratheons' wild hacking met the fluidity of the Connington's graceful swordplay. At the point of impact, Stannis won with his superior strength. However, as the standoff of blades continued, Jon's technical skill showed as he gradually maneuvered himself into a position of advantage. Stannis broke the tie by powering his shoulder into Jon's chest. His bigger frame knocked the smaller man off balance. He followed up that advantage with a violent slash that nearly bit into Jon, who hastily redirected the slash with his trusted steel. Snarling with each attack, Robert's older brother barreled ahead with anger powering the savage overhead sword strikes. He rained down on Jon. The smaller Ser buckled numerous times, his body shying away from the pale metal that slowly encroached into his personal space. At this rate, the power of Stannis Baratheon would spell Jon's doom. Jon was smart enough to see that and reacted accordingly. Panting sharply, he waited for the next of Stannis' boorish strikes. Stannis relied on power more than skill, which left him with openings for those resilient enough to take his sword. Jon was one such person. He bolted forward and buried the rounded top of his buckler deep into the larger man's stomach. Stannis' armor ate most of the damage, but the force pushed him back and cut off his downward stroke. Jon quickly cut up his sword, slicing through the brown pelt and cutting into the armor underneath. Grah Stannis howled like a beast, lashing out as he took the damage. His non-sword arm whipped to the side to slam the shield in his hand into Jon's helmet. Metal creaked as it twisted inward, cutting into the Griffin's left cheek. His feet continually shuffled until another person stopped. Jon's momentum instinct demanded Jon spin around and attack, so he whirled around and cleaved through a Baratheon bannerman's neck, cutting clean through the spinal cord. Shaking away the daze, Jon dug under his helmet and threw the damaged piece off to the side. Cold was the rain, and it made Jon sigh softly in relief. As it fell on his sweaty skin ready for the fight, he turned back to Stannis to see the man stabbing his sword and a man trying to crawl away from him. Jon saw someone different below the heel of the Baratheon brood. Who he saw was his dead best friend Rhaegar. Red covered up everything else as his base instinct called for the sweet taste of revenge. Stannis' that scream signaled the second round of combat between the two leaders. It also served as a signal for the men around them, who poured all they had into the battle. Time skip. It didn't take long before Naruto found himself severely regretting his choice to climb up the side of Stone Drum. He made it around 50 feet when regret settled, and at that height he got an accurate feel for how bitter the cold wind could be when in drenched clothing. Long story short, he was miserable the entire way up. Now at the top of the Stone Drum, Naruto and his dripping cloak stood in the raging winds and cold rain. From up here he could see it all. He saw the faint glow of orange where the battle was taking place. Blue Eyes also found the ships out in the distance, specks only given away by the lights on them. This high up everything looked small, but the consequences of this fledgling day were anything but small. I picked one hell of a way to start the new year. The curious blonde wandered down into the depths of the Sea Dragon watchtower, taking the stairs down from the top of said tower. There wasn't much light apart from the square patch at the foot of the steps. Fortunately, Naruto didn't need the light like he did out at sea. He used chakra to pierced the dark. What in the world? Naruto's words of surprise jumbled through the darkness, creating an echo that spread freely through the tower's vast innards. Inadvertently stumbling into a storeroom left Naruto with a discovery that left even the confident assassin unsure of what to do. He got down low, almost on his knees, before he inched forward with his hand stretched out, placing his hand against the cold surface of a bone. The magical potency of the item caused Naruto's chakra to go haywire. Dragon skull. Amazing. Forget about the magical properties in the bone here. He was with an actual dragon's skeletal head staring back at him. The tender touch of his finger tracing the outline of the dead dragon's orbital socket didn't make it any more real in Naruto's mind. Dragons disappeared so long ago, it's difficult to imagine them ever existing. What else are you hiding? Dragonstone. Naruto had a feeling in his bones that he could spend years trying to unravel this place of the past and not even scratch the surface of its potential. Most people would try to steal something like this, or at the very least destroy it, but not Naruto. He wanted to preserve it. He desired to see this last well past his time. A thought filtered through his mind, and with it a dark look of anger settled on Naruto's face. The Baratheon would destroy this. There was no if in that statement. I can't take this whole thing. I wish that I could, but I just can't. Making a choice. The killer's hand glowed a faint blue as he wrapped it around the only horn left on the skull. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto snapped the horn off the rest of the dead dragon's bone. Had even broken. The horn was about as long as Naruto's thigh. Sorry, I had to do this, but at least this way part of you will survive the night. Storing the bone horn safely on his person, the mountain slayer left the dragon remains with a lingering gaze, one rife with remorse. The faint musings of a whisper drew Naruto's attention away from the remains of the legendary beast. He drifted after the sound. His progress came to an abrupt end at the western wall. I have to hurry. Closer to the whispers. This time it was easier for Naruto to pin down the sound. He heard the hurried gasp of an out-of-breath man directly beneath him. What's with the Targaryens and making secret hatches? Shaking off his curiosity, he kept an ear out for the sounds of shuffling below. It wasn't until he heard a door slam that Naruto decided to act. Chakra flare up around the sole of his foot, and with a stomp the floor beneath Naruto collapsed. Naruto gracefully dropped, and through a rain of stone dust and debris he waved away the particles of dust and stone and gazed out at the room around him. Potion bottles gleamed under a coating of orange torchlight, and a desk of scattered papers filled Naruto's sight. Reading a paper left on the desk, Naruto came to a quick conclusion. This is the Maester's room. He narrowed his eyes on the closed door. Where was he going in such a hurry? The damp bottom lip of Naruto's cloak left a trail of small puddles on his way to the door. Pulling the door open, one of Naruto's blue eyes forced itself shut when a gust of rain carrying wind blasted him. One eye stared into the rain to find a short tunnel structure that emptied onto a long bridge hundreds of feet over dragonstone soil. The whole bridge swayed with the direction of the wind, a hazard distance that only went two ways there, and here would it kill one of these people to make a simple way to access a castle. It became a reoccurring theme to make stupidly elaborate ways to make it into these royal dwelling places. Thunder's booming escalation reset Naruto's attention to the problem at hand. It might not have killed them, but it can kill me for sure. Shaking his head and throwing his hood over it, Naruto marched out onto the death bridge. Every step reminded him that no amount of metal bolting could make something like drenched wood safe, let alone when that wood got thrown from left to right by an uncontrollable wind that never stopped howling. Chains and stone support structures stopped the bridge from capsizing, but even with all that in his chakra, Naruto nearly slipped off the side several times. Bounding across the final third of the bridge in one exceptional leap, Naruto landed in front of Stone Drum's entrance, hood down, two lungs inflated with the distinct sea air due to a deep breath Naruto took as he prepared himself. Here goes nothing. He front kicked the door, shooting the wooden barrier off its hinges and into the opposite wall. With a shattering crack, Naruto rolled into one of Stone Drum's many halls. Once there, the assassin sat on a knee with a pair of tightly clasped kunai in his hands. He left his arms crossed in a position of alert, but all he found was silence. The sound of nothing made his head do up in confusion, expecting a swarm of guards and getting nothing left. Naruto, bewildered, still weary, he took back to his feet and checked the hallways on both ends. Anyone home again? He didn't get a response, not even one that his finely tuned senses could pick up. With no one to use them on, the whiskered blonde slid his twin blades up the cover of his sleeve, scratching the side of his nose with his thumb. Naruto tried to think of some way to decide where he'd go next. His deliberations got put on pause when another flash of lightning bathed the corridor in white light. Through the casting of ivory light, Naruto saw something that he missed in his initial entrance, a facet he overlooked when he burst in, expecting resistance. In front of him there was a tapestry, a beautiful one at that. While exquisite, it wasn't the beauty that left Naruto staring. The assassin found himself interested in the long shadow stretching out from below the tapestry. The wall should be too close to make that long of a shadow, in his opinion. His curious fingers slid against the side of the decorative banner. Naruto got to the middle point when he stopped suddenly with a smirk. thought so. Ripping the silk banner from the wall, he exposed a third corridor. This must be important if they went through the trouble of hiding it, and it doesn't have stairs. His silent steps approached the slightly ajar door with caution. The door's wooden frame creaked loudly as the whole thing swung open slowly. Under Naruto's hand he saw two things in the center of the room and only had one word: fuck. Naruto found the body of Queen Riella Targaryen at rest, under a thick covering of blankets. Her body clammy and enveloped in a stagnant sweat. She didn't even remotely resemble a queen. Another curse flowed off his lips when he saw the barren crib next to her body, but no baby. Naruto positioned himself next to Riella and her bed. Up close he saw the terrible state of the dowager queen, and he didn't mean the sweat and pale skin. What little he saw of her arms and hands were blemished by terrible scars. As a man of many talents, Naruto saw them all. He took note of cuts made by both arrowheads and blades. There were burn marks and even something similar to a kitchen knife wound on her body. The worst part, these wounds were at least a decade old. Who did this to you? Let something so inhumane happen to you? Dropping her arm with a shake of his head, he gazed upon the look of anguish on her face. The sorrow on his face was clear to see. Let me show you some ounce of respect, my lady. Halfway up with the sheet that he planned on covering the former queen with, Naruto dipped his head in respect. Knowing he couldn't do more, he did something that he very rarely did. He sent a prayer out on behalf of the silver-haired woman. In front of him, the smooth shadow of the sheet reached her chin. Before Naruto paused again, I promise that I won't let Robert's forces anywhere near you, not after what they did with Aegon's body. Never again. Thump. His deep blue irises expanded and his pupils shrunk down to two tiny dots. Hastily tossing aside the sheet, Naruto dropped his head and stuck an ear against the woman's chest. Every bit of himself got poured into straining his senses in a desperate gambit to see if he could hear that single sound once more. Under any other set of circumstances, Naruto might find himself embarrassed to be like this. Having his head pushed against a woman's chest this way was just asking for misunderstanding. But if she was alive, come on, give me something, anything. Being aware that his voice might not reach her didn't stop the blonde from funneling conviction into his plea. He didn't get anything from her for so long that he stopped breathing, so that even that slight sound couldn't cause interference. Thump. The entirety of Naruto's body recoiled from Riella like a taut spring. Finally freed. She's alive, but that pulse is way too slow to keep her alive. Dying. She's dying. Biting on his lower lip, a mad scramble to think of something ensued in his head, swiping the sticky threads of silver hair from her face and forehead. Naruto physically tried to psyche himself up. He leaned forward and whispered to the worn-down woman on the verge of death, "You're a dragon, right? Then fight like one." Riella fight. With his voice left for her to fight towards, Naruto could prepare himself for something he never tried. On warning from his mentor, he tossed his cloak to the side and slapped his hands together in front of him with a look of great focus. His entire body glowed bright blue. I, who have been blessed by this earth with the power of life, call for help to cure strife. The shielding of energy burned twice as brightly around Naruto. His presence encompassed all, but while the stonework started to falter, Riella was unharmed by those of the old world and free from the confines of magic. I men, these times most tragic, there is no room to mourn. By my hands you will be reborn. Naruto's spell ended with the energy inside of him starting to bubble as the chant took effect. Groaning at the pain of being burnt from the inside, he bit roughly on his lip. His teeth drew blood, but it was the pain he chased. Making use of his pain as a tool of focus, he began to force all of his chakra into his throbbing hands, a shockwave that knocked the room's walls down spread with Naruto and Riella as its focal point. The recognizable azure hue turned into a lively green as blood dripped from the corner of Naruto's mouth. I need more. His muscles already fought to rip through his skin, but Naruto wanted more. No, he demanded more. Veins and muscles alike bulged as the assassin turned healer forced his screaming cells to pour even more of his life force to the surface. The toll on Naruto's body was obvious, but so were the results. The pure power generated by Naruto and his chakra left the entire room alive with a low humming sound. His hands went from a light gleam to a pair of green glowing suns. Quickly putting his hands over Riella's sternum, he willed his life force to wrap around her fading body. A coating of green energy formed around Riella's body. The sphere of power gradually sunk into the former queen's frame. Work already. Naruto said something of plea to himself. His thoughts came to an end when his body coughed up blood. The blonde looked through the sweat in his eyes at his patient, panting deeply but smiling. He saw them all, of the scars on her skin starting to fill in one by one with natural healthy flesh. His chakra came with even more benefits than the concoctions of potions or even magic, because he commanded raw life force. His energy not only healed the damage done, but it also started to reverse the effects of aging. The effect the spell had on him, well, Naruto chose to ignore that part. The gaunt woman filled out to a healthier state gaining around 10 pounds. Next, her pale skin started to get back its fair complexion. Riella's last scars healed up beneath her right eye. 4 minutes of agonizing pain and his healing of Riella Targaryen was complete. Any chance at celebrating crashed like Naruto did when his body gave out and sent him to the floor, barely avoiding the side of the bed with his head. Naruto sat on his knees spitting up blood. Now it was Naruto, who looked half dead. The clarity of his blue eyes turned milky, and his blonde hair was one step from pale like a sheet. But he'd live. Riella wouldn't be so lucky without him risking his health to heal her. Hacking up some more globs, the depleted man lifted his trembling limb with the back of his hand. He smeared the blood across his mouth, giving him a wicked mock smirk. The expression left in blood no way matched how Naruto felt, but it was what it was. I have to get up, I have to get her out of here before Naruto traded out, speaking for a massive cry of agony that followed him all the way up to his feet, stirring up what little chakra he had left. The energy got fed to the muscles in his limbs. I hope I can hold out. His body didn't agree with the choice to pick Riella up, but that's what Naruto did. The athletic frame on the assassin may as well be a wet noodle with Riella there to add to his physical burden. Ignoring the prevailing scent of sweat on Riella's body, he kept the blankets tight, which kept her modesty safely guarded. One step out of the room and Naruto heard the sounds of swords clashing. 2 of his possible escape routes were gone. That meant he only had one way out, the bridge of death. No more goofing around. Glassy from the healing process or not, the determination couldn't be denied from Naruto's eyes. His head went down and Riella's unconscious body got pulled into his chest. A moment later, at the stone under Naruto's feet shattered as a mixed blur of yellow and silver raced out into the rain, crossing the bridge in less than a second. Naruto felt his slick soul slipping. When he tried to stop himself, he cursed and turned so that it was his back crashing against the wall in the maester's room. Stifling a grunt with colorful words, he forced down a mouthful of blood by swallowing it. Chakras too low to focus on healing, Naruto advised himself through a haze of pain. It only felt worse because he couldn't get full breaths through his burning chest. With a limp in his stride, Naruto carried the queen to the hole he left in the ceiling. Jumping up into the storeroom of oddities, the fatigued male didn't even spare the dragon skull he took from a glance. This time around, he didn't have any time to spend on the dead. Naruto needed to put all of his waning focus on making sure that he and Riella escaped Dragonstone. If only the Baratheon weren't following out a bloody crusade against the defeated dragons. Maybe it was too much to ask that King Robert Baratheon learn mercy, or at the very least restrain. He cringed softly at the weight of the stormy wind blasting his aching body. It wasn't the kind of greeting he wanted. At the top of the tower, vacant blue eyes dropped down on Riella's unaware person. He chuckled wryly with a matching smirk as he stared at the dragon sleeping in his arms. You haven't said a word to me, and you might be the death of me. Elia would have my head for this, but I can't bring myself to leave you here. Carefully limping to the edge of the sea dragon tower, Naruto experienced a strong case of tunnel vision which almost sent him tumbling over the precipice. He stared down into the choppy waters, waiting for them below. His gathered sigh carried one last message: only one way down. And then Naruto took a step off the tower. Time skipped. The weight of the situation fell off Naruto's shoulders when the shoreline of the Free City Mirror appeared over the choppy waves. His ship traveled. It felt like centuries since he jumped off that tower, with Riella in his arms and his chakra wrapped around him like an eggshell. Over the long night, Naruto lost track of the number of times he worried that someone might find them. The wild storm should have sunk their little ship outside of Dragonstone. The royal fleet should have discovered them. In the end, Stannis' hasty attempt to please his brother failed, and Naruto sailed to Essos with a recovering queen sleeping on board. It was a blessing in disguise, because with how Naruto felt, any fight had the potential to be his last. Pulling the life force from his body to heal the dying dragon left him in a perpetual state of sluggishness. His body felt heavy, and he barely had the strength to do the things he used to do with ease. Being isolated on his ship helped remedy some of his physical limitations, but it was still frustrating to Naruto. Whenever he went too far, he looked at Riella and realized he didn't have it too bad. The water from the ocean shattered against his rocking vessel. All the broken water sprayed softly against Naruto's pensive expression. The assassin looked at the miles of waves. They helped him stay aware through all his fatigue, both natural and forced. At least it's over now. Rotating on his heel, Naruto worked his way over to the only cabin on the small ship. He nudged the door open as carefully as he could, a courtesy paid to the former queen. It really didn't matter because she didn't ever wake up, but it's what he chose to do. Sunken in blue eyes took in the slumbering woman's face. A smile slowly slipped into place on Naruto's weary face. You're looking much better than me. We've gotten through the tough stuff now. I need to get you back to my place without making people think I kidnapped you. The last thing he needed was the local authorities on his case. Riella looked infinitely better than she did when Naruto stumbled upon her next to that emptied crib. His work got rid of her scars and burned flesh, leaving healthy but pale skin. The process of fitting her into his cloak took more time than usual, If he successfully managed to hide the last Dragon Queen's face, it'd be much easier to convince people this wasn't a kidnapping. Here's hoping for the best, Naruto told her, pulling the hood up over her dirted silver hair. He smiled at the sound of a port docking horn. Finally, their long journey across the Narrow was over. Naruto scooped the hidden queen up in his arms. Bridal style, he tucked her face against his shoulder and away from prying eyes. As soon as he stepped out on the deck, his worries of what came next left him. He couldn't recall being happier to see a person than he was now looking at the man tying his ship to the dock. Instead of having to talk down a stranger, Naruto had someone he spoke with plenty. The man's name was Marco. Instinct drove Naruto to tighten his grip on Riella as he stepped from the ship to the dock. His golden hair instantly glowed with the shine off the morning sun. The bright light also made his haggard physical appearance more glaring. It was a state that Marco commented on right off the bat. Holy hells, Naruto, you like absolute shit. What happened to you? So much for a proper hello. The tired ache in his bones almost forced Naruto to tell the modest dockhand the truth. Thankfully, he caught himself before making that terrible mistake. It's nothing that a little sleep won't fix. How have you been? Work been good? A look filled with trepidation filtered over Marco's round face, and he scratched at the top of his shaved head. The man's olive skin proved just how much time he spent working out in the Esso's sun. How much have you heard about what's been happening here in Mir? Was it Naruto's imagination, or did Marco drop his voice a few decibels? The sea of Myrth continued licking at the back of his neck with its east-blowing wind. Naruto looked out at the city limits in front of him. Had that much changed in the handful of months that he spent away from Mir? No, my attention has been firmly planted in Westeros. What happened? Things got even sketchier when Marco paused and looked around the empty docks and pathways around them. The folks up in the churches have been up in arms, and no one knows why. They've moved past threats and have gone on to fighting amongst each other. Whole groups of people die in fires and to different poisons. Everyone in Mir is on edge because they think they're next. The Magisters won't even leave their homes anymore. When did all of this start? Naruto thought that coming to Essos provided a buffer of safety until he was ready to move Riella. It ended up the opposite. He inadvertently brought her into another conflict. A few weeks ago, someone walked into the Red Temple. No one lived to say what happened exactly, but everyone knows there was an explosion. I'm not sure which group did it, but the Red Priestesses are up in arms. They are recruiting anyone willing to swing a sword for them. The craziness of it all made everyday working docks a risk to his health. Risk or not, Marco needed the money, so here he was. That's all the assassin needed to hear to know where things went from here. Naruto figured that in response to the Red Temple's mobilization, the other churches would start forming their versions of militant groups. At this rate, Mir would be ground zero for a war of zealots, and the collateral would be egregious. No, scratch that. Mir already turned into a war zone. I can't take Riella back out on the water. She won't make it. Hells, I might not make it. I have to ask, who is that? A more perceptive person would have seen how Naruto's fingers tightened against Riella's obscured body. As it were, Marco focused more on looking into the two incredibly tired-looking blue eyes of his friend. Naruto was lucky to have had plenty of time on the boat to come up with a cover story for Riella and her current condition, and with the leverage of his relationship with Marco, Naruto was unlikely to be questioned further. After his initial statement, I found this woman on a ship a few miles out. I think she ran out of food and water, so I'm going to get her some back at my place. Naruto's words were half of a lie. He did plan on getting some much needed nourishment in Riella. Marco looked at Naruto for a moment before chuckling. You always did have a soft spot for the ladies. We both know that's not the entire truth. Remember that woman that thought she could twist my arm with blackmail? How'd that end up for her? Oh, I remember that one. What was her name again? Elysaria. A flash of the assassin under that smile showed up in the form of a pair of frigid eyes. That was her name, wasn't it? Despite the summer heat, Marco shuddered at the look on Naruto's face. I forget how scary he can be. If you'll excuse me, Marco, I have to get my new friend here out of the sun. Or right, be careful out there, Naruto. Naruto dipped his head and swiftly moved around Marco. It had been months, but the blonde still knew these paths like the back of his hand, traveling them on the daily burnt these roots into his brain. Something Naruto was thankful to have time to get to the safe house. Out here in the maze of warehouses and impoverished buildings, the only kind of people on the streets were the poorly paid and slaves. The city didn't see any reason to renovate the old buildings. Their choice made this the perfect place for someone to hide. A turn here and a twist there, and Naruto carried Riella deeper into the bowels of Mir's forgotten district. The walls narrowed in on him, but never so much that they impeded Naruto from getting where he wanted to go. Naruto reached a chain link fence peeled back far enough for him to crouch down and wiggle through the hole. A few minutes later, and Naruto came up to a latched metal plate that he promptly opened, letting in the light. Home sweet home. His Whimsical smile stretched as he saw small dust particles falling across the light rushing into his home carrying the unconscious dragon to the couch. He carefully set her down and sunk into the fat cushion. Riella's feet rested on his thighs. Let's pick this back up in a few hours. I can use some shot. I time skipped the days and Mir blended together for Naruto. In the morning he took care of Riella, feeding and bathing her. It was awkward at first, but the whole process felt normal. After a handful of days he used his early afternoons to get information on the tension in the city, but everyone was rather tight-lipped and his nights went spent watching over Riella and training his body. Speaking of his body, he finally started recovering from the aftermath of the healing spell he used on Riella. Not only did his hair and eyes regain their vibrancy, but he also felt more energetic with every workout. Naruto couldn't go as long as he used to without a break yet, but the progress was encouraging. He hoped that Riella showed the same signs of recovery soon. Naruto let out a sigh, wiping away the gathered sweat from his forehead with a dampened cloth. The contrast of the cold fabric on his warm body felt fantastic, as did the small streaks of cold water that came down from the rag. If I continue improving at this rate, maybe he won't notice that I used the spell. He knew that if his teacher found out what he did for Riella, that he'd get his ear chewed off. It wouldn't be the first time. Tossing the cloth back into the bucket, sitting by his shirt, the blonde walked to the wall of wooden planks that held several of his ebony knives. Inside of it he plucked one of his knives free and he ran his finger against the bladed edge. He used these beauties so many times over the last 2 weeks that he chipped the metal. It looks like I can't put off getting more of these any longer. If I carried these into a real battle, they'd be useless against any weapon of average quality, and that wasn't acceptable to the assassin. He tossed the kunai into the wall once again, and to Naruto's expected disappointment it didn't sink into the wood far at all. Yup, it's time for a visit to Camellia Invictus. Naruto glanced down at himself, but before that I need some clothes. Naruto went back into his mirror home and got dressed quickly. Unlike the long clothes he wore in Westeros, the blonde killer opted for a tighter wardrobe here. In Essos he wore a form-fitting black leather piece that got shaped in a way that lightly resembled the physique of the human torso. The only separating section between his leather chest piece and pants was a silver buckle on his black belt. All this equipment, and I still feel naked without my blades. Naruto's lament followed him to Riella's bedroom. He wanted to check on her before he left just to be safe. I'm heading out for a bit, Riella. I'll be back before you're up. And with that Naruto shut the door and made his way into the powder keg that was the free city. Mirror. The number of people out on the streets was a shell of the past, and the people he did run into were tense around him. He figured that made sense since no one knew who stood with whom in this war. Raul or Bakal and many-faced God, those were the 3 most influential religious groups in the city, but to make things more complicated, several smaller groups joined in on the chaos. 2 of those minor groups were more active than the others: the Black Goat and the Church of Starry Wisdom. What Naruto read about those 2 in particular rivaled the cruelty of the Red Religion. If anything, the Black Goats and Church cult were more heinous because they did these things with fewer people. Their ideologies made Naruto's skin crawl. The thought of the more fanatic Red Priestesses having control of an entire city sounded like a thing of nightmares. A familiar branding of a storefront drew Naruto out of his thoughts. Imperial Steel, Naruto's one-stop shop for all his weapon needs. His smile dropped when he saw the closed sign nailed to the door. This isn't Camellia or Victus handwriting. What are you doing near the shop? Naruto looked back over his shoulder. Calvin, now introduced as Calvin. The young man's hazel-colored eyes widened in surprise. Sir Naruto, the blonde in leather, groaned under his breath. Naruto tried telling Calvin to drop the title, but the store's help always defaulted to Sir. He couldn't let Calvin know about his lordship in Dorne, or he might go insane. Where are the twins? Naruto was far from pleased to see the grimace on Calvin's freckle stained face. I think we should speak about this in private, Sir. The blonde assassin raised an eyebrow and stepped aside so Calvin could open the shop for them. Both men stepped into the shop and Naruto smiled at all the weaponry on the shelves. Those 2 always were productive smiths. So Calvin, where are Camellia and Victus? Sir, what do you know about the problems in Mir? The new Lord of Water Gardens grunted internally. Great, this again. More than I'd like to know. Why? What does this have to do with the twins? Calvin looked down at the ground and guilt. Lord Victus and Lady Camellia gained the attention of the religious groups because of their smithing skill. Lady Camellia said that the Red Priestesses took Lord Victus, and I was in the back when the church cult came and abducted Lady Camellia. Naruto bit back the curses on his tongue. Mir really did change since his last visit. How long ago was this? Calvin, a few weeks ago, Sir. I tried gathering some men to free them, but the cells words are all hired by the religious groups. The feeling of uselessness, nodding Calvin's gut, made the boy of 16 years feels sick, damn it. With that amount of time since past, Naruto couldn't guarantee that either of the twins was still alive. He chewed on the inside of his cheek and closed his eyes. He needed a plan. I need information, sir. Sighing, Naruto opened his eyes and found a confused teen looking back at him. Calvin, stay here and look after the shop. Don't let anyone in. That isn't me. Got it? Calvin stammered out an affirmative answer. I understand. But what about you? I'm going to try and get Camellia back from the Starry Wisdom idiots and Lord Victus. He's next. The red religion is larger and has more influence. That means more time leaving the other prisoner. Now be quiet and do as I say. Why yes sir. Naruto rushed out of the store, exhaling through his nose. Here I was hoping for an easy day out. Hold on Camellia, I'm coming for you. Time skip later that day. One little twist to the left and the click of him picking the window's lock made Naruto smile. He shimmied the glass pane open and wriggled his way through his created opening. Naruto transitioned quickly back onto his feet. The frosted glass pane and his center of gravity were the only things helping Naruto keep his balance on a ledge several stories off the ground. Naruto looked down into what he supposed could be called a temple and found lots of black and dark purple. Small explosions of painted and sewn white filled the dark like a cheap imitation of stars in the night sky, and the torches that provided light didn't reach high enough to threaten Naruto's position in the rafters. Taking a breath, Naruto leaped to the nearest wooden beam, landing in a tight crouch, carefully treading over these thin beams. The assassin worked his way deeper into the building. His footsteps were even quieter than the small hiss of the flames burning through their torches. It's quieter in here than I expected. It didn't matter. Naruto still had plenty to work with here. The roof started elevating as the side rooms funneled into the more spacious main chamber. Naruto went from crouch to a full stand. He scanned the floor for anything of interest. The assassin got what he wanted in the form of three men in dark purple robes. It appeared that the cloaked acolytes were in the middle of a conversation. Lovely, let's hear what you have to say. Do you think 'tis the day, brothers? I grow tired of hearing this idiotic city slander our name. Patience, brother, we are not as large as the fake religions. In Mir we must make up the quantity with quality and cunning. The third man in robes spoke next. It has been a month and Sir Alonso's responses to this point have been underwhelming. Now that's not the truth. Just recently we've acquired the talents of the resident weaponsmith. They say she is the best in all of Mir. Again the second man returned to the conversation. If only the woman would do as the seer commands and make the weapons we require. Calm yourself, brother. There's no reason to raise your voice in such a manner. The woman will cave and we will have our weapons. Naruto almost dropped down from the ceiling with his steel bared at those words, but he held off for the time being. I hope so. There's Valyrian steel gathering dust as we speak, the first man said through a sigh of frustration. Have the second group returned, Brother Bellet? No, Sir Alonso doesn't expect them back until this evening. The man that started the conversation cut in with a scoff. I don't like the idea of leaving our brothers on their own at times like these. Brother Bellet nodded his head in agreement. Neither do I, but we require swords and crossbows if we are to expel the false idols from Mir. My sword is getting rather thirsty. 'Tis the time for action, not sitting on our collective hands. Naruto decided he heard enough. Dropping down from the rafters, he landed in between two of the three men. The assassin came down, daggers first, driving his weapons into the back of the acolytes. Next both men fell with Naruto, who sprung up from his knees and buried a third kunai in the throat of Brother Bellet. His chipped weapon made an uneven cut, but he got his tool of choice deep enough to silence the acolyte permanently. He pulled the bloodied blade free and caught the religious man's body before it hit the ground. Naruto dragged the three corpses off behind a stone altar table, leaving only small puddles of blood leaking into the stone creases. Hey, what's going on in there? Don't make us start without you three. Naruto grabbed his kunai and flung himself up against the wall, sinking into the shadows, oblivious to Naruto being right on the other side of the wall. A new man walked into the main chamber with a frown. Where'd those idiots hooked from behind? The man had a hand placed over his mouth before a shooting pain hit his body. A gurgle of warm blood went down his throat thanks to Naruto and his kunai slashing across the robed man's jugular. He held the man close to his chest, refusing to release the church member until he felt the last signs of life slipping out of the man's weakening body. Once he released his last breath, Naruto allowed him to slide down to the cold ground. I smell food. True to his senses, the waft of wild meat bronzing over a fire went to his nostrils. He kept his head against the stone wall and listened through the noise in the next room. Take the gristle and bones down to the non-believer. Are you sure? The seer was clear with his orders. He wants the prisoner treated right. A bit of hunger will make her more agreeable. I'm not wasting my stew on some faithless whore. Alright, but if the seer asks, I'm telling him this was your idea. Whatever. Naruto whipped around the corner. In one fluid motion he sent a kunai flying through the air. The projectile went right between the eyes of the man holding the plate of waste products, dead before the plate hit the ground. The shattering of the cheap porcelain got the cook's attention. What the ocean-colored eyes of Naruto met him. His shock froze him in place until he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Naruto tightened his grip on the kunai and shoved it deeper into the man's stomach, right into his liver. I hope you meet whatever deity you worship. Tell him the color of these eyes when you meet him. With the light taken from the man's shocked eyes, Naruto took a step back. The cook's body crumbled at Naruto's feet. He took a look at his bloodied hands and shook his head. They said down, that means there must be a cell in here somewhere. A few minutes later, sweeping the floor and moving sacks and barrels, the user of chakra found something that stood out in stone flooring. He uncovered a square door made out of thick wood with a single metal ring attached to it. This has to be it. Naruto pulled on the ring until he dislodged the creaking door. He took a last look around before he dropped into the square-shaped hole. Barely on the ground, he found who he came to free: Camellia, the tan-skinned woman with healthy brown hair, had her eyes blindfolded, but the sound of his voice snapped her head up. She sat on her knees with her arms pulled out and a pair of chains. Her hands looked fine, but everywhere else carried cuts and spots of dry blood. They were torture marks. Who's there? Her dry, raspy voice sounded awful on the ears. It's me, Camellia. Bear with me. This is going to hurt. Naruto, the SO's native, winced when the metal shackles around her wrists yanked about, clanking against her tender wrists. She kissed her teeth until a relieved sigh broke free. Camellia used her free hand to pull the blindfold away. Naruto, the assassin turned savior, smiled at the battered woman. You look like shit. It felt better to say than to hear. Camellia couldn't help but laugh at Naruto's blunt take. Please don't make me laugh, it hurts. When Naruto freed her second hand, she flashed him a thankful smile. Naruto nodded. Come on, let's get you out of here. The woman weapon maker tried to get up with no success. I can't feel my legs, she whispered with a growing sense of worry bubbling up inside of her. He quickly came over and put one of her arms around his shoulders. Don't worry, it's only temporary. Camellia allowed her friend and customer to support her. Reality finally caught up with the recently liberated woman. Naruto, my brother, the Red Priestesses, they took him right out of the shop, them and their cells. Words, yes, Calvin told me. I'll work on getting Victus back next, but first let's get you back home. Quickly guiding her back to the still open hatch, Naruto took both himself and Camellia out of the lower floor. With a single jump, Camellia winced, which Naruto apologized for as he walked her out of the kitchen area. You're quite skilled in the art of stealth. I almost didn't hear your escape. Would you kindly put my prisoner back? I still need her exceptional talents. Naruto didn't recognize the man standing between them and the exit, but his friend did. That's Seer Alonso, the Church of Starry Wisdom's leader. Alonso wore the same purple robes as his minions, but he had his hood down. The religious leader's lengthy black hair compared favorably with any woman. Naruto immediately linked it with the length of Cersei Lannister's hair, but what unsettled Naruto the most was his fake smile. It pleases me beyond belief that you think so highly of me, my dear. Camellia scowled at the man behind her, kidnapping. Bearing her anger, she exploded in an outcry of emotion. Fuck you, freak, I'd never think of you as anything but trash. Ignoring the offset smile on the Seer's face, Naruto looked at Camellia from the corner of his eye. Can you move yet? Camellia put some weight on her legs, testing her balance with a tentative step. I think so. Good, get to the side, I'm going to take care of this guy. Naruto released Camellia, keeping his eyes on Alonso as Camellia slowly limped away. The blonde felt his fingers twitch. Step out of the way and I won't kill you. How fierce and fearless too. I can give you a loving home here with my family. With your peerless skills, Camelia's excellent craftsmanship, and my planning, we will have complete control of Mir by month's end. Join me and change the world. Alonso extended his hand in Naruto's direction, both physically and metaphorically. My blade is my own to aim. No one controls me, least of all someone like you. Naruto snapped back, his arms and legs tensing in anticipation of what came next. Alonso folded his hand into a fist. He studied Naruto with his head dipped in a perplexed frown. I don't know what you mean, someone like me. I only want what's best for Mir, I assure you. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man, trying to decide if Alonso was lying or just delusional. Bombings, bloodbaths in the streets, and chaos aren't what the people of Mir want. That slaughter, not change. The seer smiled, shutting his eyes and extending his fraudulent smile. They will be remembered for contributing to the rebirth of the new Mir. Won't you be a part of the new Mir with us, my friend? Naruto's frown intensified. A new world isn't built on the bodies of its citizens. He heard enough to understand that this seer wasn't quite right in the head. He finally spoke something that made Alonso frown. That's ironic, coming from the mouth of an assassin, isn't it? The way of black and white is out of date in our new world. The blonde assassin almost told Alonso that he had no connection to the faceless men, but held back at the last second. Let him think the men and women of the black and white opposed him. Enough talk, Alonso. I agree. Naruto took the first move. He unleashed a wave of dragon glass needles that he had stored on his back from the darknesses under Alonso's long sleeve. Stars of inky blackness slammed into his needles. The shadow stars met the needles. The shadows scattered, but his needles shattered in the process. How rude of you, butcher. For the first time in a long time, Naruto was caught off guard by an adversary. That was magic, correct? Alonso raised his hand, spinning a vortex of dark energy over his empty palm. The magic grew and grew until it went high enough to reach the seer's face. You should have joined me while you had the chance. Now you must fade. Naruto had just enough time to launch himself to the side and avoid the cluster of black spikes that smashed down on his earlier position. He cast a wary glance at the black sludge of the floor before flicking a pair of kunai at Alonso. Alonso lifted his hand in response. A black box developed in front of him, catching the two kunai. His box shook a few times before shrinking and crushing Naruto's weaponry with an audible crunch. Oops, did I break your toys? If he can't see me, he can't block my attacks. He tried to jump into the air, but Alonso caught him by the ankle with a leash of darkness, slinging Naruto to the ground. The seer advanced toward his downed foe. Please don't run, you'll hurt my feelings. Each step the black-haired man took came with a shadow tendril reaching out and binding Naruto's limbs. The assassin tried struggling against his gradual subjugation, but he ended up in the same state as Camellia was when he found her. Naruto get upset. Woman couldn't help but voice her concerns upon seeing her friend forced onto his knees. Alonso stopped his approach for a moment. The off-putting man shifted his worrying smile on Camellia. Quiet, my dear, I'll be with you after I'm done with our friend here. Naruto grit his teeth in frustration every time he fought against his restraints. They yanked him back in place. The end result left Naruto with a growl. This shit is stronger than it looks. I didn't want to do this, but you left me with no choice. Naruto lifted his head and glared at Alonso. The man now stood over Naruto with a shadow-covered hand looming ominously. But don't worry, I'll give you this last chance to join me. He refused to give Alonso the satisfaction of an answer. His display of defiance only amused the magical seer. I'll take away your stubbornness. It's my job to open the eyes of those who do not understand. Naruto watched as Alonso's hand neared the side of his head, the inky darkness getting closer to his skin. Goosebumps rose on Naruto's forearms from the sudden drop in temperature, but as a whole he remained ready. Can I say one last thing? Alonso reacted with a courteous nod of his head. I shall allow it. You underestimated me. Naruto's blue eyes fixed daggers into the man above him. How do you figure? A smirk that bared his pointed canines worked its way onto Naruto's whiskered face. I can do more than just sneak around. The familiar blue of his chakra encircled the blond man's body, breaking free of his binds with a simple flex. Naruto sprang up and slammed his fist into the side of Alonso's shocked face. The sound of Alonso's orbital socket breaking under the assassin's punch told the story of how hard he got punched, knocked clean off his feet. The seer fired backward with his right eye already swollen shut and bleeding. Naruto wasn't looking at him, however. His sights were on his own fist. That didn't feel right. He shook off those that thought as something for later. Right now he needed his focus on getting Camellia back to safety. Ready to go. Camellia showed her disbelief clearly and honestly. Only you would beat some magic tossing warlock. If you don't have a trick up your sleeve, then you aren't a very good assassin, and a poor assassin is a dead one, Naruto explained in an attempt to play off his latest feat. If you say so. Before we go, I think you should take that creep's Valyrian steel. He doesn't need it. I bet I could make something nice with it. Just give me some time. He left it in his office if you're interested. The allure and undeniable usefulness of Valyrian steel was tempting. Naruto went to ask where his office was, but Camellia beat him to it by pointing at the large black door behind the altar that he dumped the bodies near. Okay, I'll grab the spoils, then we can go. Time skip. Naruto sat with Camellia in the smith she called home, wondering how many things his brain could juggle at one time. He said it once, but it bore repeating. The plans he had in coming to Mir didn't play out as planned, not in the slightest. His citywide war friends kidnapped and the last Targaryen queen in his care. It was almost enough to make Naruto scream. He only got this far by taking things one step at a time. This was compartmentalizing in its purest form, and now sat across from his weapon-making friend. Naruto was forced into crafting a new plan. And that's the story I got from Calvin. Is there anything you can add? Anything at all? Maybe you can help me make sense out of this chaos. Insight from someone living in Mir before his arrival would be invaluable. Camellia clutched the cup that held her heated drink, taking solace in the warmth leaking through said cup. Can't say I have much more to contribute. I thought those red loons were the end of it. I never thought someone else would come and pluck me like a cactus fruit. Naruto rubbed a thumb against his eyebrow and groaned. I was afraid you'd say that. From what I remember of Mir, the Red Priestesses have loads of locations around the city. Victus can be in any of those places. The free cities spread across Essos weren't exactly uniform paths, crossed, separated, and crossed again, and never-ending consistency. Naruto likened it to an underground ant colony. A search through somewhere like that wouldn't be easy. She passed her cup to Naruto. He looked like he needed it a lot more than she did. I'm sorry that this burden has fallen on your shoulders. Naruto the blonde took a large gulp of the warm tea. Naruto hummed to himself as the savory blend spread across his tongue. He turned his focus back to a battered-looking Camellia. If it's for a friend, I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I thought after all the shit in Westeros I could come here and catch my breath. He really should have known that things wouldn't be so easy. Camellia closed her eyes, resigned to the same feelings Naruto shared. I bet there's a lot of that going around these days. Both individuals sat commiserating in silence until Camellia said something that caught Naruto's attention, and here I thought the red folks were actually normal. Shows what I know, they were normal, or at least normal enough for the world around them. When did that change? Do you remember when the red priestesses started acting like this? Naruto handed the tea back to Camellia with his question. I don't remember the exact day, if that's what you're asking. One day, I noticed their attitudes changed along with their practices getting more aggressive. Plenty of people in Mir were concerned, but none of them had the pull to do anything about the growing fanaticism. Naruto thought about what that meant, and none of the options were pretty widespread. Changes of that fashion usually come with a leadership change. It doesn't sound like this change was for the better. It brought up another list of complications. Naruto couldn't kill a religious leader without bringing danger down on himself and, more importantly, on Riella. Completely missing the context of the blacksmith's question, Naruto needed a repeat. Could you repeat that? I missed your question. What will you do? What's the next move? Thankfully Camellia didn't make a big deal about his lapse in concentration. The blonde assassin smiled grimly at this question. What I do best, I'll go in and get information. If the red doesn't have what I want, I'll leave quietly, but if the priestesses do have Victus, well, that's when things get interesting. Camellia counted on Naruto saying something like that. His response even got a smirk for its trouble. Sometimes I think I know you better than I know myself. Naruto defended himself the only way he knew how, through blunt honesty. Anyone should answer the same if they're doing it for a friend, which is why I'll get to work on a fresh batch of kunai free of charge. Come back tomorrow and you'll be armed to the teeth once more. I hate it when you walk me into things. Naruto's exasperated look suggested that this wasn't the first time Camellia did this. In fact, it happened too often for his liking in the limited amount of time Naruto spent with Camellia. Camellia grinned at the disgruntled man opposite her. Too bad, Naruto, it's good for you. If you're serious all the time, you'll end up like those old men we always make fun of. Despite himself, Naruto's lips twitched upward. Alright, you might have a point this time. Just take care of yourself. I don't want to find you asleep at the shop when I come back. Don't worry about me. The forge is basically another home. Another night here won't kill me. Be here first thing in the morning and I'll have everything ready. It was tough to argue with the young woman when she came forward with that much confidence. She appeared so sure of herself that it convinced Naruto to relent. You know I'll be here. Naruto had no problem making that promise. Getting Victus back was the top priority, and that all began when the sun rose again. But first he needed to get his rest. Hey, Naruto said. Blonde stopped and peered over his shoulder at Camellia. She had a warm smile waiting for him. Thanks again. He nodded his head one more time, then turned to the door, throwing a parting wave over his shoulder as he pushed the door open. Naruto had one more thing to say. I'll see you in the morning, metalhead. It wasn't until the door closed that Camellia fully understood the scope of the jab Naruto used. It was the same playful insult her brother favored, and Naruto's usage of it left her smiling. Time skip sun spear. The expression on Elia's face was as warm as the desert sun, but there was something more there, a hint of longing reflected in her copper-colored eyes. I can't tell you the last time I stopped and looked at Sunspear. I mean really looked. This view from high atop a balcony built on Sunspear's tallest tower was something very few had the privilege of experiencing. Elia shared this moment of introspection with her best friend Ashera. I'm guilty of doing the same with Starfall. Elia, there wasn't much about her ancestral home that Ashera cared for. Its simple existence fanned the bad memories of her past. However, the views were breathtaking and sorely underappreciated by those living there. Do you miss it? Starfall. Elia carefully touched on the subject. She more than anyone knew what a sensitive topic this was. For Ashera, having a new life to rely on made it 10 times easier for the beautiful Lady Dane to move on. Her attitude ended up reflected in the answer she supplied. Honestly, no, I don't. Sunspear has everything I could want and more. We're happy to have you. It's been wonderful having you around. The smile at home on Ashera's face ended up being infectious because Elia found herself with a similar smile on her lips. A glimmer of nostalgic happiness lit up Ashera's gem-like purple eyes. Yes, just like when we were girls. Memories of that time left Elia laughing. That seems so long ago, back when they were free of courtly complications. I know it does. The words too long floated about in Ashera's unspoken thoughts. Gathering her courage, Elia launched a plan that was weeks in the making. Funny how all that time didn't make what came next any easier. Ashera, how do you feel about Naruto? Elia was thankful that Ashera didn't make her wait long for an answer. If you're asking, then I think you already know the answer to that. Taking the inquiry in stride, Ashera kept her poise like any true lady. I do, or at least I think I do. Returning her eyes to the skies in front of them, the Viper Princess felt her nerves building up despite her best efforts to keep them at bay. You feel the same way about him, don't you? If Elia got her turn, it was only fair for Ashera to fire back the same question. Both of them knew the answer was a resounding yes. Look at us being around Naruto has blunted our tongues. Elia didn't Know why that came off her tongue, but it left both women laughing in good spirits. I have to thank him. Being blunt as you call it is much easier than playing insignificant word games. Naruto and his tendency to say what he meant was nothing new. Ashura still recalled her first conversation with the assassin. She thought his mindset was ambitious, revolutionary. Even into some degree it was just that. However, Ashura learned through experience that there came a certain freedom living that way. Affection had its way with Elia as she thought about Naruto and all the good he did for her family, and here I worried about him influencing Rhaenys. I should have been more worried about us for the better. I reckon there was no denial from Ashura. She did the exact opposite by embracing the idea, so Elia knew what Ashura meant, seeing no reason to dance around it. The desert princess spoke honestly about her feelings. I think the phrase absence makes the heart grow fonder is applicable here. It's only been 2 months and I miss Naruto more than I did my own family when I was stuck in King's Landing. Purple eyes softened in understanding. Ashura wondered what Naruto was doing now so far from Dorne. She missed the stubborn blonde too. I've been trying to keep myself busy. Leaves less time to think that way. It isn't working. Ashura reaching out and putting one hand atop Ashura's closest hand. Elia lent her support and the warmth that came with it. When I'm with Naruto there's this spark I haven't felt this thrill before, but I see what you and Naruto have and I don't want to take that from you. Elia. Hers was an admission of both admiration and guilt. It portrayed the conflict on her soul despite what it suggested. Elia smiled as she looked into Ashura's uncharacteristically nervous eyes. I can see why we're best friends. I thought the same thing, but with you and Naruto instead of myself and Naruto. Elia, you don't have. After Lyanna Stark, I mean Ashura didn't share the understanding that her best friend showed. She felt guilt gnawing on her heels, something that only deepened with Elia's acceptance. Like any friend, Elia did her best to put Ashura's mind at ease. That meant breaking the weak comparison between Ashura and Lyanna Stark. You're nothing like the Stark Ashura. You're a trusted, treasured friend. She was some home-wrecking whore that sunk her teeth into Reader. Although moving on from that incident got easier with Naruto in her life, old grudges as deep as this one still came to life. Occasionally this happened to be one of those times. I'm truly touched that you hold me in such high regard, but this doesn't help us with Naruto. Elia sighed out loud. Her response stood as a precursor to a suggestion she still didn't believe she was suggesting. I know, and making Naruto choose would hurt him. Neither of us wants that. She took a breath. Now was the moment of truth. What if we take a page out of my brother's book? Ashura, to her credit, only needed a moment to piece it together. Wait, you mean share him? The two of us. It was bold enough to put a soft pink on Ashura's pale skin. It's not ideal, I know, but if that's what it takes, then it's what I'm willing to do. Elia's eyes showed her infallible determination. She didn't have to say anything else, not when the resolve in her demeanor led by example. Looking directly into the princess' brown eyes helped Ashura understand how serious Elia was about the idea, and it impressed the lady from Starfall. Wow, I never thought you of all people would suggest that. Elia still found room to crack a smirk. Despite the seriousness of it all, Doran wouldn't be happy, but I can think of a few that would be over the moon about the idea. Ha, that's putting it lightly. Ashura could see little Rhaenys' enthusiastic reaction to the potential news of Naruto being her new dad. My gut instinct is to say yes, but I need some time to really think about what this will mean. Alila nodded her head, accepting her friend's hesitation. Hell's part of her counted on it. I understand. I had weeks to think about the consequences of doing this, but in the meantime, how about we take Rhaenys and go mess with Oberyn? That sounds lovely. Time skip. Mirror kunai metal needle shuriken. I thought you were only making kunai. The following morning Naruto was greeted by a table littered with his preferred weapons. This meant Camellia went ahead and forged a handful of things he didn't ask for. In short, she did what he was worried she'd do. Camelia's response was a smile that didn't carry an ounce of regret. She even went ahead and shrugged her shoulders with a cheeky smirk. Hey, if you're going to save my brother, I want you to have a full bag of tricks. Any chance of a retort coming off his lips died with that. If Naruto had a sibling and they were in trouble, he'd sink an entire island if it meant their safe return, so he accepted the unplanned surprise with an understanding nod. Fair enough. There was an air of satisfaction wrapped around Camellia while watching Naruto place her weapons on his person, but beneath that worry simmered as the last of the table vanished beneath Naruto's baggy clothing. Naruto the assassin stopped patting himself down and turned his attention back on Camellia with a cocked brow to match. What's up? Naruto felt a lot better now that he was armed. By the way, I know you're doing this to help me out and I'm grateful, but please look after yourself too. Camellia wanted her brother home, however, if that cost her Naruto, then the guilt would slowly crush her. Spending time with Elia, Ashura and Rhaenys helped Naruto read emotions that his teacher never bothered with. These same emotions poured out of Camellia like wine at a Martell party. With this newish insight, he put both hands on Camelia's shoulders and smiled. Trust me when I say this, I'll be fine out there, you hear me? When Camellia failed to find doubt in the blonde's blue eyes, it calmed her nerves. Trust Naruto. stress trust between them if they wanted to work for him, and to this point he hadn't abused that relationship. He earned her belief in him. I hear you, you big blonde idiot. Taking the playful insult in stride, he let out a much needed laugh. I suppose there will always be a part of me that's an idiot, but it's gotten me this far, so it can't be all that bad, right? Camellia didn't laugh like Naruto, but her crooked smirk showed that his comment struck a particular nerve in her, one that led to unrepentant amusement. No, I guess not. Content with the job he did, Naruto took a step back from the hard-working woman. Good, now stop acting like I'm walking to an early grave. It's a real buzzkill. Their unusual goodbye got put on hold when a panicked red-faced Calvin stormed into the shop. The poor thing was panting, nearly teetering over the edge of hyperventilating. They the squirts. Taking a step past Naruto, Camellia put herself at the forefront of her employees' attention. Take a deep breath, Calvin, then you can tell us what's happened. Calvin still struggled to take full breaths, but at the very least he was able to piece together a coherent sentence. The red priestesses are doing a kindling in the square. 5 of them. Lord Victus is among them, pale as a fresh sheet. The sister of the previously named man froze up. Not even Calvin, doubling over in front of her, stirred Camellia from her current position. No, Camellia may as well have broadcasted her thoughts with how easily Naruto nailed down what she'd do next. Oh no, you don't, Camellia, you aren't a fighter. If you go there now you'll get yourself killed. Calvin, stay here with her until I get back. Naruto didn't afford them the chance to argue with him. As soon as the order came through, he shot out the open door and straight into the streets of Mir. Chaos was the name of the game, but that didn't slow the agile assassin's sprint toward the danger. Clusters of people were weaved through like lacing, and small obstructions vaulted. Without breaking stride, Naruto went full throttle, which earned whispers amongst the people, but the murmurs and rumors could come later. Naruto heard the thumping beat of his heart in his ears. For some reason that distinct sound pushed Naruto to go faster. It was as quick as he could go without passing the boundary of what the small folk deemed possible. If Naruto had doubts he was going the right way, then the growing crowds guided him forward. What's this terrible feeling in my gut? Shaking his head in his doubt, Naruto gritted his teeth and committed himself to the final stretch. The people Naruto forced out of his way didn't enjoy his determination, but he had to get to the front of the crowd. Victus was counting on him. Camilla believed in him, and he would not fail. Send these lost souls to the Lord of Light. Whoosh! A minute too late. Naruto barely had time to confirm the middle man of the 5 as Victus, and only because he happened to lock eyes with the gagged man. That was the last he saw of Victus or any of the hostages before a curtain of deadly orange swallowed the posts holding each captive. Naruto wasn't the only one trapped in horrified silence. The men and women of Mir around him also stood stunned as living people received the treatment one should expect of wood. To make it worse, the 3 priestesses responsible for this atrocity turned their backs to the crowd. That's when their chanting hit the air. It was a haunting melody that brought goosebumps and unease. It also unleashed the rage of the people. Tears and obscenities flew from the amassed people of Mir in equal measure. However, none of these simple folk could do anything more, since the priestesses brought 10 fully armed sellswords with them for protection. The one person standing in the crowd that could do something glared venomously at the fanatics. Naruto hadn't felt this level of pure anger since the sack of King's Landing, and it showed from the shadow of his hood. Naruto's eyes flickered back and forth. They alternated between red and blue so fast that they looked purple at times. All of your lives are forfeit for those unlucky souls in the crowd that happened to be near Naruto. It must have felt like Winterfell was relocated across the narrow sea. So was the chilling weight of Naruto's unchecked killing intent. Those people also put a lid on Naruto's promise of slaughter when one of them bumped into his side and brought him out of his trance. What was I thinking? I can't lose control here. Too many innocent people will get caught in the crossfire. Naruto's thoughts ended up prophetic, and not in a good way. The mess only got messier when a new party walked onto the scene from the east. It was more of the Starry Wisdom cult with 8 gruff-looking thugs there. They are the ones responsible for Sir Alonso's coma. Bring me revenge, and the gold is yours. A chorus of colorful vulgarities filled the air. Outnumbered, but enticed by the promise of wealth, their weapons were brandished with the utmost confidence in their victory. One of the guards hired by the red priestesses frowned at the unexpected challenge. He licked his dry lips and nodded toward his brothers in arms before throwing down his visor. The man looked back at the 3 women in red. Please take your leave, my ladies. We will handle these ruffians on your behalf. The priestess favored the man with a tender smile that accentuated the vivid red applied to her lips. Thank you for your bravery, good sir. May the Lord of Light keep and protect you. All of you hold. There wasn't a soul amassed that didn't look west when a new voice announced itself. This included Naruto. West was where a third faction entered the scene with some 25 men. They were numerically the superior force. The magisters of Mir demand you cease this foolishness, comply or die. Despite the numbers they held, Naruto personally wasn't intimidated by their force. He could see at least 10 of these fighters were boys of maybe 15 summers. Naruto didn't see a scenario where they offered much to the chaos of battle. The other forces apparently felt the same. We choose violence, with the burning bodies of innocent people acting as a backdrop. Battle-filled mirrors, street swords, axes, and polearms cried with bloodthirsty hunger as the vengeful men swinging them threw themselves into the fight. Lust, wealth, loyalty. In the end the motive didn't matter because the result was the same. Naruto watched with a detached expression, as one of those young boys had his armor bloodied with his own blood, the spear that took his life, leaving the lad as fast as it came. Alan driving his sword into the belly of the man that just killed his friend. Another young man left his weapon there and went to check on his comrade, forgetting the battle entirely. He tried keeping Alan's blood in the boy's body, to no avail. When the life faded from the young warrior's eyes, his friend screamed, until the stress of it all caused him to puke. He wasn't the only one. A handful of the civilians that stuck around also emptied their guts. The rancid smell of burning flesh grew strong enough that the faint of heart couldn't bear it. It was an awful sight, no matter what angle you looked at it from, and it was only going to get worse, with men dying by the handful in a pointless exchange for nothing of worth. So Naruto forced himself to look away, as much as he hated to admit it. This wasn't an uncommon scene. The young, misguided, but brave died for those with power. All that changed were the titles of the people in power and the bodies which propped them up. Invictus is part of that pile. I couldn't save him, but I can still make the people responsible pay. The assassin flowed through the scared city folk like moving water, vanishing into the crowd of faces with ease, skulking into a narrow alley. Naruto found the perfect building to climb. Leaping up, he grabbed the thin ledge of concrete beneath the closest window. With only one arm, he pulled himself onto the windowsill. From that point, Naruto reached out to his left and climbed a hanging piece of metal vertically toward the roof. In all of 5 seconds, Naruto went from the blood-stained grounds to the rooftops of Mir. The blonde allowed himself one last glance at the burning corpses before he raced across the city's skyline. This was his own personal highway, free of the madness in the streets below. Naruto didn't take long to catch up with the 3 priestesses. Every bit the predator in this situation, he slowed his pace to keep stride with the women marching on, oblivious to his presence. It wasn't until his trifecta of targets tucked into a nondescript home that Naruto dropped out of the sky. He landed in complete silence, not even his breathing making a noise. Despite his willingness to commit the deed, Naruto forced himself to take a moment and think. This would be the first time he killed a spiritual leader. It was a boundary that he stayed clear of, but revenge necessitated ugly behavior. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. Naruto went to that quartered-off portion of his mind, that dark section in his brain that allowed him to turn his emotions off. Anger and the like had no place at this moment. Compassion was for the noble and anger for the fools. An assassin needed complete control of themselves if they hoped to dictate the world around them. I'm not a hero, I'm an assassin. With that mantra engraved in him like some sort of creed, Naruto acted. Loading up on his back foot, Naruto made his shock entrance by kicking down the door. A wall of shrieking panic welcomed him. The 3 priestesses that started this whole tragedy scrambled away for fear of their lives, but they only had so much room to work with. You can't be here. Your presence is unwelcomed by the Lord of Light. The woman's position of power was undermined by the quiver in her cadence. G, go while you still can. Leave us, BB brute. Naruto stared down each of 3 for 5 seconds, a handful of moments where it felt like Naruto's cold blue eyes were drowning the women in their unforgiving depths. His silence only compounded the despair gripping the women's fast-beating hearts. Oh, or maybe you're here to assist us. We can reward you handsomely if you provide us an escort back to the temple. She was grasping at straws, showing a moment of doubt in their predetermined fates as deemed by the Lord of Light himself. The kunai that dropped into Naruto's hand was an ominous opening to their negotiations. He stepped with purpose. He stepped in silence. Naruto ended his silence only after getting close enough to hear her breathing. There's one thing I want stuck between looking at his eyes and the blade in Naruto's hand. The priestess all but agreed to his unmentioned desires. Say it, and the Lord of Light will make it so. Naruto leaned in until they were chest to chest, and his mouth hovered by the trembling woman's ear. It was an intimate position with none of the associated passion. I want a life for a life. The assassin tore through the cloak of stoicism spectacularly. Naruto took the priestess by the back of her head and buried his handheld knife into her throat. He stared through the soul of the wide-eyed woman as she slowly choked on her own blood. That was for my friend. For the 2 remaining women in red, survival instinct kicked in at this point. They made a frantic dash past Naruto, but only one of them managed to shove the other down, essentially leaving her fellow sister for dead. Greed did not serve the priestess well. Just before her hands could reach the door, a pair of shurikens struck her from behind. The first black metal star hit her straight between the shoulder blades, stopping her in her tracks. She barely squeaked out her pain scream before The second shuriken hit her with one throw. Naruto cut deeply into the young woman's vulnerable flesh. The vengeful assassin sliced her femoral artery and caused the woman's robes to be soaked in blood before she fell face first into the door. Her shocked body moved in hitched motions to stop the bleeding, but there was no saving her. There was a frightening beauty in the sheer precision Naruto exhibited. However, not everyone could appreciate the honed skills of a killer. No, please have mercy, sir. Laying on the floor in between the bodies of her fellow priestesses, the last burning witch was one of those people. Apparently realizing that escape wasn't an option, she took to begging. Blue eyes lacking a soul peered down at the woman, making her feel completely insignificant. Why did you do it? I didn't want to. They forced me to do it, I swear. She put all of her soul into every word, hoping to convince Naruto of her honesty, because that was her only chance at avoiding death at his hands. Who gave the order? Closing her eyes, the fearful woman gave up information that all but betrayed her vows to her religious order. It was the high priestess. She sends all her orders through birds. Naruto's forehead furrowed in confusion, pushing his eyebrows down into an inadvertent glare. Why wouldn't she meet you in person? Why risk the chance something gets misinterpreted or intercepted? Sheila's emerald eyes glinted with worry. When they opened again, her attempt at swallowing the knot in her throat was visible. As she's not here, she left me before I even joined. Bullshit. Dropping a knife from his sleeve, the blue-eyed killer pointed his weapon of choice at Sheila. He ignored her rightfully placed flinch and pressed her for more. Try again, and this time make it the truth. Her red robe showed how fast her heart was beating, same for her dilated eyes that couldn't remove themselves from Naruto's knife. And no, sir, I swear on my life, it's the truth. Please, sir. She was telling the truth, but that brought with it another question: mercy or revenge? Time skip. The visual of Camellia pacing a trench through her floor was par for the course. Since Naruto's departure, Calvin tried his best to calm her down, but his boss didn't listen. After 10 minutes with no success, he gave up and waited in terribly tense silence. Come on, Naruto, what's taking you so long? That mantra had nearly seen as much action as the pacing that carried Camellia back and forth. Or at least that's how it felt to Calvin, hearing it for the 100th time. For the sake of his sanity, Calvin had to intervene. It's going to be okay, I'm sure, sir. Naruto will be here any minute now. Can I get you some more tea? Anything to stop her from continuing on like this. And in some ways he got what he wanted, because Camellia rooted herself in place, but she also turned and glared a hole through the young man. Calvin, if you don't shut up, I'll bury you neck deep in the sand. Understand? Visibly recoiling in his seat, the blacksmith assistant chose the wise option of nodding his head in silence. Best not aggravate her anymore. Calvin was spared her wrath when the shopfront's door swung open. Calvin saw the nervousness on Camelia's face as she slowly turned around. Camellia and Calvin saw Naruto standing there in the doorway. They waited for someone else to join him. Victus had to be right behind him, and they waited and they waited. Naruto and Calvin both saw the realization strike Camellia, because that was the moment she collapsed to her knees. Her loud and sorrowful cries made both men wince, but it was Calvin that looked away to hide his own tears. Brother, why was it you? You didn't deserve this. Camelia's cries filled the room. Even Naruto falling to his knees and embracing her didn't reduce the pain rushing free from the broken-hearted woman. He tried everything in his power to help her, from rocking in place to rubbing her back, but if they had any effect, then it was minimal at best. Naruto's sad eyes closed to prevent the tears leaving him, with his chin on the top of Camelia's head. I'm sorry. Camellia grabbed the front of Naruto's cloak and buried herself even further into the stability it provided. Her whimpering cries continued to escape. Hindered or not, this was how the pair of friends could be found for the rest of the afternoon, all the way up until the moment that Camellia finally fell asleep in Naruto's arms. Only then did Naruto feel comfortable leaving her alone. The trek back to his safe house was a lonely one. He didn't have anything to buffer his thoughts, which ended up saddling Naruto with a world of regrets. Victus, at least his cloak hid the misery on his face. Closing the door behind him, Naruto shed his cloak and deflated. Today fucking sucked. I just want to go to bed, but I have to check on Riella first. Not expecting much change in her current condition, Naruto opened the door rather quickly. He made it all of one step into the bedroom, before the very aware gaze of one Riella Targaryen froze him. A purple cobalt color mix filled her gaze. It was a look of curiosity and guarded suspicion, and being bedridden didn't make the last Targaryen queen's presence any less magnetic. Who are you, and where am I? Naruto tried to hold it in, but his defeated sigh wouldn't be contained. My night just got a lot longer.